Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 456, and my guest is Jewell Chambers. Jewell was raised in rural Mississippi, and you've probably heard of her famous siblings, the Chambers brothers. They had a huge hit, The Time Has Come Today, and maybe you've heard of the family gospel band, the Chambers Family Choir. They have music throughout the family, for certain. I was introduced to her through Bob Zaw, who has been on this show, and he told me about Jewell and said, you have to talk to her. Her life story is incredible. And she was very kind and brought me into the house, and we sat down in her living room and had this conversation. So I'm really excited for you to hear it. And she shares stories from her childhood and nearly a century on the planet. Check out heyhumanpodcast.com for links and to learn more about my guests in the show. Check out susanruth.com to learn more about me and my other artistic endeavors, including coming to see The First, my short film, the next festivals that it will be playing: Seattle Film Festival, Chicago Horror Film Festival, and a few more. It's going to be at Shorts Corner in Cannes. And yeah, all those things are on susanruth.com, so definitely check that out. You can find me on social media under Susan Ruthism, and my music is on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever you get your music. It's probably on there. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on Apple or wherever you are listening to your podcasts. And thank you for listening. Be well, be kind, be love. Here we go. Jewell Chambers, welcome to Hey Human.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me in your home.
Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. I like to start these conversations with taking all the way back to the beginning of life and your childhood. Tell me about where you grew up and what childhood was like.
Well, my earliest memories, let me start here. It was 10 of us siblings. And I was the first girl born, and my mom was sickly, and she didn't think she would make it. And from a little girl I remember, I guess about 6 years old, she told me that she didn't think she would live, to see her children get grown. And she didn't want us separated. She wanted to make sure that we stayed together. And so she taught me how to really become a woman. I got married at 15. I'm jumping way ahead, but that's the type of upbringing, that I had. Of course, my being 6 years old, the family had not grown as, to be a set of 10. The one memory that stands out in my mind as a little girl, and my mama being so sickly all the time, we had gone to my grandmother's house, and our mode of traveling was mule and wagon. And anyway, we got ready to come home, and my sister, let me back up and tell you how the order of children, that my mom had. 3 boys, 2 girls, 3 boys, 2 girls. And other words, so we were at Grandma's house, and Mama was not feeling well, and it was time to go. And my sister Bonnie, we both wanted to stay, but Mama said, "No, you have to go because I don't feel good." And so I was upset, of course. We got home, and Mama kept getting sicker and sicker the closer we got home. And Daddy helped her out of the wagon when we got home because she had to urinate. And I was helping him, And as I was holding her arm, it felt like an egg went down her arm and past my hand. And she just went limp, and I thought she had died. I took off running and screaming and saying, my mom is dead, my mom is dead. In the area that we lived in, we were the only blacks in that area. Mama was well loved by everyone. The man's property that we lived on, he drove a truck that hauled bales of cotton to the gin and stuff. Well, I'm running down this road about 3 country miles, if you know what country miles are. And I'm running, I'm just screaming. No, I don't have no mother. My mother's dead. My mother's dead. And so the ladies that was close by, and I'm passing their houses, and I didn't know it at the time, but they just took off. I think one lady, she was milking her cow, and because we were in the country, of course, you know. She was milking her cow. She set her bucket down, and they all gathered at Mama's house. And come to find out, my mama was not dead. So the man the place that we lived on, he got in his truck and he overtook me, and he told me, he said, your mother's not dead. And I said, yes, she is, yes, she is. So he persuaded me to get in the truck, and he took me back home. And the doctor said she had a nervous breakdown. But anyway, I was glad that I was there with her. Well, I was about 6 years old, and I was born in 1934. I'm 91 now.
You said it was 4 boys first, and then you came along?
The order she had us at 3 boys.
3 boys
and
first.
2 girls.
Okay.
3 boys and 2 girls.
So you were...
and I'm the first born girl.
So you're the 4th oldest?
Yes.
Yes. That took me a minute also to do that kind of math. And what city are we in at this point?
Let's see. I think it was called Forest, Mississippi.
Okay.
Because later on we moved to another area. It was called Carthage, Mississippi.
I feel like it wasn't uncommon, at least especially in those days, to have multiple children. That was pretty much normal, right?
Well, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was your family very tight and close?
Yes, very tight. We were very poor, very poor. But Mom always told us, she said, you children may not have what other children have, but always remember you have each other. And there was a lot of love in the family. And that's why she wanted, if anything should happen to her, if she passed away, she did not want us separated. You know, because usually when there's a large family, or if there are any children at all and the parents die, you know, people take them and raise them up. But she didn't want that to happen. She wanted us to always be together. Yeah. And we've always been a very close-knit family. It's only 6 of us now. We've lost 4 brothers. So, but all of the sisters are still here, and 2 brothers. And when we get together, it's just like we can see each other today and hug and go on. And tomorrow we see each other, we still hug and go on. You know, it's just always been a close-knit family.
When you get together with each other, is it like you're little again?
What we usually do, we just reminisce.
Yeah.
We just have a lot of fun, just talking about old times and the things that happened and how we survived and when my dad was living, and we used to talk about things that happened, and it would upset him because it was not pleasant, you know. Mm-hmm. And my dad was uneducated, so he was really a poor provider. And so we had some stories, you know, to tell, but it was fun because we like I say, we survived, you know. But for him to hear it upset him, and so we had to stop when we would all get together. We had to stop talking about things, you know.
Sure.
You know, so.
Were you expected as the first girl to be a surrogate mom, especially if your mom was unwell?
Well, I didn't realize, you know, at the time, I didn't like the idea that I had to do everything like that. And I learned to cook when I was like 6 years old. I remember standing on a wooden box, you know, to be up at the counter. I would prepare the food, but my mom would always put the seasoning in. I didn't know how to do that. But it's just what she instilled, you know, in me. She always said, "You're the oldest girl. You're the oldest girl." You know, so you have to take care of, you know. And she told my siblings, she says, "Jewell is going to, if something happens." She always used that term, "if something happens to me." She would never say, "if I die." She just say, "if something happens to me." and I'm no longer with you all. Jewell is to take over, and you all better mind her. So one of my brothers right now, he calls me Sister Mom. Lester, he calls me Sister Mom. We always lived on a farm. My dad sharecropped. He was a really, really good farmer. I mean, whatever seed he planted, it just flourished. He was a farmer from his heart. He grew the biggest, humongous watermelons, and he would always save the seed from, and he did sugar cane. His sugar cane was the tallest, peanuts, just a bunch, just a humongous amount of peanuts on a vine, he was just a farmer. And everywhere they lived, which was a lot of places, he always left fruit trees. Always planted a fruit tree. He and my mom got married. Her mom did not want her when she was born. She was, born out of wedlock. And so she always mistreated my mom a lot, really, really bad. In the area that they lived in, the man that we figured raped her, Mama would never talk about it. She would never talk about it. So the message that we got came from hearsay, But her dad lived in the same area that my grandmother lived in. And as Mama grew up, she was just like alienated because Grandma Pearlie, her name was Pearlie, she was very mean to my mom, as the story goes, and that's what Mama told us. And
it was your mother who was raped, or your grandmother was raped?
My grandmother.
Okay.
And my mother.
Okay.
Incest. Other words, my oldest brother is also her brother.
Yeah.
Incest. How they met, well, after she had her first son, Major, I think when that happens, it releases some kind of demonic thing into children, and then so she became a little promiscuous, and so she was pregnant with her second son. She was 7 months pregnant.
I think it's trauma, not demons. I think it's just absolute trauma,
Well, it's bad.
Yeah.
It's a very bad situation. But anyway, she was 7 months pregnant with the second son, and my grandma had put her out, and she was at somebody's house, and my dad, who was 30 years older than my mom, knew the people that she was living with, and he had come to visit. Well, in the meantime, he's 30 years older than my mom. My mom was born 1910. He was born 1880. He was visiting there, and my mom, she said she was washing the dishes or something, and he was sitting there at the table just looking at her. And she said to herself, why this old man keep looking at me? Just keep looking at me. Well, he had 2 wives previous. Both had died. So he had 2 boys by the first one and a girl by the second marriage. And so he's looking for a woman to raise his children. And he's watching my mom, she says, and so he's, and he's thinking, she'd make a good mother for my children, because I don't know, just something about the way she carried herself. And so that's how they met. 3 days after they met, they got married. 3 days.
Your mom probably thought, here's somebody that at least I'll be able to have a roof over my head and I'll be able to eat. It's survival.
Yes, that's exactly what she felt, because she'd been like an outcast all of her life. So she felt, well, he can I show you a picture of my dad?
Sure, absolutely.
Well, this is just like one shot of him here. And that's my mom.
Oh, that's
And this is a book that I had started making a long time ago, and I never got it finished. This is all of us together here.
Oh, wow. What humans can endure.
I know, that's my brother and her brother.
Wow. Did he have any difficulties having been the result of incest?
I don't think so. I've never heard of any incidents And these are just part of his offspring. He had 4 children. My dad, he came in at the tail end of slavery, so he had no education. So education didn't mean anything to him.
Well, and sharecropping was basically slavery still.
But he was a good father. He was with us, and that's important. He never left us. Now, Mama said he left one time, and he got down the road a ways, and he thought, I can't leave her. And he came back, and he never left again. Mm-hmm. And, just having a father around, even if he's not a good provider, it's just good to have a father. He was not mean. I never heard him and Mama argue. They never had, and I'm sure he gave her plenty of reasons, because he used to pull us out of school to go and work in the field for other people, and especially after we got big enough to work, and the joy of having a big family when things were rationed, like they had this little
the rationing during World War
II.
Yeah.
And they issued some kind of books with little coupons or something in it. Mm-hmm. Well, he never was able to, for I think sugar. The sugar, you had to have those coupons to get sugar, and he had a whole bunch, and he used to trade them off, because he wasn't able to buy the sugar, so it was a plus for him, so. And these are some of the things that we would laugh and talk about when we would get together, and that would just irritate him and stuff. And like I said, he'd pull us out of school, and to Mama would just say, she called him Mr. Chambers, and he called her dear. I never heard him call her anything but dear. Her name was Victoria, and because of his age, she called him Mr. Chambers, always Mr. Chambers. He was precious. Food, like sometimes food was not available in our house, and just a little bit of food, but my mom was able to, a little bit of nothing, and make a whole lot of something out of it. We remember one time she had a cup, she would take 1 cup of peas, dried peas, and make a whole big old pot of peas and with water, a lot of liquor, pot liquor we called it, and make cornbread, and that's what we would eat. And these are the things that we would laugh about, and when we get together. There were times when there was no food, and there was one time it was during season where watermelons were in season, and my mom didn't like watermelon, and we worried about that. And because we worried what was she gonna eat and stuff. It was no problem for us because we love watermelon. We never held it against him for not being a good provider, because I guess because of the love that that we had for him. Because he never, like if he chastised one of us, or this was his spanking, and it's over, But my mom, she would get a switch and go, "Man, you gonna do that again?" And she would just go, but her whippings were terrible. I don't ever remember getting one, because I was always, I was just raised to kind of like be in charge type thing. So she was such a sweetheart. Everybody loved her. She raised us up with, I guess I call them sayings. It would be like, for stealing, if it's not yours, don't take it. If you make your bed hard, you're the one have to lay in it. A cow needs his tail to fan flies with more than one time. Don't burn the bridge that takes you across, because you might need that bridge to get back over on, And every little saying that she had a meaning. And Dad had a few, his was always the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And that's how we lived. That was our way of living. And
Did they have conversations with the kids about, obviously you were living in segregated South, how do parents prepare kids for something like that? How do Black parents prepare Black children in that era? And I mean, even today, obviously, those conversations have to be made. Was that dealt with in the family? And also, with the specter of World War II and what was going on, how did you all deal with all of that?
It was not easy. We have never known prejudice, never. Even in the South, we were just raised that people are people. And as the old saying goes, we were raised to stay in our place.
What does that mean?
It means that if they want to be called Mr. whoever or Miss, we did it. Mm-hmm. And that was just part of living. We used to have to walk to school, and there was one house that we used to pass, and it had children there, and they would be waiting for us, so they could taunt us and call us the N-word and stuff. And we just, they never harmed us. We just ignored it. We were just taught to. What Dad had a saying he says, when it comes to fighting, it's better to say, "Yonder he goes and here he lies."
That's wise words.
And he says it doesn't make you a coward, but you use common sense. But he did also tell us, don't let somebody pass the first lick, because you may not get a chance to pass the second lick. But we avoided fights, always, not only with the white children, but also the Black children. We just always liked peace. They liked peace in the family. Other words, at that time, like if you went into an establishment, the restroom was colored only. Well, we didn't try to go into the white room, because that's called staying in your place. Mm-hmm. You do the way what's expected of you to do, and they like you for it. Daddy had a lot of respect for, from white people. I don't remember the story, but he told it. He didn't take nothing. In other words, he was short-tempered, but he stayed in his place. But if anybody riled him up, I don't care what color you were, because my dad was part Indian. I don't care if you riled him up, he was a force to deal with. And so there was a story that somebody had gotten in his face with something, whatever, and he had struck a white person. And of course they came for him, and he, made sure that I was told that we were all safe in the house, but he got his shotgun. So when they pulled up on their horses or whatever to get him, he didn't run. He just told me, he said, "Okay, you came for me, but one of you guys gonna die." And nobody wanted to die. But what happened, he gained respect of people, and so they always called him Uncle George. Nobody never messed with him after that. He stood his ground.
He got the first lick in.
Yep, he did. He let them know he was not afraid to die. But he said, "But one of you gonna die with me." And when it comes to that, nobody wants to die. They're not ready to die. Mm-hmm. But anyway, as we grew up, and and it got to be all 10 of us and everything. We always sang. My mom, she traveled around with like a community choir or something like that. But they sang the songs using the do, re, mi notes. They did, mi, do, la, sa, do, la, sa, That's how they, would sing the songs. And they would do it in the note form, and then they would do it in the word form, So my mom had a really good voice. Daddy could sing too, but he didn't like singing as much as Mama did. But we used to sing, and we would come out of the field, and we would wash our feet from the, you of course you work with no shoes on. And we would, draw up they call it a foot tub, where we washed our feet before we went to bed. But we would just sing at night. We would just sing and sing, and the only music that we had was the radio. And we used to listen to the Grand Ole Opera, and we learned all of those songs, Low and Lonely, Sad and Blue, just those kind of, You Are My Sunshine. And we would sing, and I guess Mama taught us how to harmonize. But we all have an ear for notes, like
perfect pitch.
Perfect pitch. And I mean, and right now, to hear somebody off pitch, it's like, you got a picture on the wall and that picture's like crooked. Well, that's the same feeling we get when we hear somebody singing and they're not right on that perfect, it's God-given to, and we used to sing, and we used to at night, and I remember we were told by some people that could hear us singing that it sounded like angels because the harmony was so perfect. And at night it traveled, the sound traveled, over the treetops of where, Really, that's how my brothers became the Chambers brothers. Because they had that perfect harmony, and love went with it, just love for people, and they wrote a lot of songs and stuff, but that's how it all started. After we left Mississippi, and we came to California.
The whole family?
Not all together. My brother Douglas was the first to leave, because our other brothers, the two that Dad had by the other wife, well, especially one of them, his name was Matthew. He stayed in touch with us all the time even when we were there in Mississippi, and every once in a while we would see him coming. And he came to California first. And then after he came to California, then Douglas, we called him Doug, Doug came. And then I got married at 15, and I had one son. And my husband, he came to California.
How'd you meet him?
My husband? Mm-hmm. Well, we were just kids together. Mind you, I was only 15 when I got married.
Baby.
But I didn't feel 15. I felt grown because of...
You've been raising up children.
I've been raised, yeah.
Yeah.
And we went to school together. He liked me. He was a nice boy. That's how we phrased it. He was a nice boy. In other words, he was just a nice boy. He was not trying to, But anyway.
I know what you're saying.
And anyway, I couldn't stay in school because I had gotten to the 8th grade. I couldn't go to high school because they just were not, my parents were not, they could not afford for me to go to high school there in the South.
But you had to pay to go to high school?
Well, you got to have clothing.
Oh, I see. And
that peer pressure has always been there, and I guess will always still be there. And if you don't have clothes to wear, you can't go. Because as we was growing up as children, the only clothes that we got were hand-me-downs, and they came from white people. They loved Mom and Dad enough that they, I remember there was some lady. We used to look up and we'd see the wagon coming, and it would be her, and she would have a whole lot of clothing. Well, I remember one time she came in the bunch of clothing that she brought us. There was a red coat, and it ended up fitting me. Well, I was the darkest skin in the family. Everybody else was a shade lighter than me. Well, you know how black people are. We got all different shades of color and stuff. Well, I was the darkest one. I got teased by Daddy. Used to tell me, he said, "Blacker the berry, sweeter the juice." That was his saying, But anyway, I ended up with that red coat, And did I get teased?
Oh, I bet it looked amazing on you.
Well, it probably did, but, well, anyway,
I had a yellow coat, and all my friends made fun of me, so they called me Big Bird.
Yeah, well,
kids are gonna be mean no matter what.
Yep, kids are gonna be mean. They tease me, because of the darkness of my skin. They related the red coat to a monkey, monkey, and anyway. And I hated that coat, but it was so cold. It was so cold down there, and the coat was really thick and nice winter coat, but it kept me warm, and I had to endure the being teased about it, but
they were just jealous.
Probably
you
jealous.
You had a warm coat, and they did, and you look good.
But getting back to that's how I met my husband. I graduated like twice from the 8th grade, and then we got married.
How old was he?
He was 6 years older than me. When I was 15, he was like 21. And he didn't like farming. He had a good job. I was a virgin when I married him. And he was a really nice guy. We had our first child. I was 16 when, I made 15 on the 9th of January. And we got married on the 26th of March in 1949. I had my first son September 11th of 1950. So, we didn't get pregnant right away. I gave birth to him at home. And that was during the time when women had babies. For some reason they thought you should stay on the bed for 3 days. Anyway, but that's how I met him. He was good, but he came to California, got a job washing dishes, and then he sent for me and Ray. Our son was named Ray. He sent for us, and we came to California, And then after we came to California, and we joined him, my brother Doug is the one that was instrumental in getting him from the farm, from the South, and brought him to California. And he got a job as a dishwasher, as I said. He saved enough money, and so he had me and Ray come. We came, and Major and his wife, we all came together.
You referred to Ray as was. Is he still with us?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. 3 years ago, it's been about 3 years ago, I had moved to Louisiana after my mom died. And he got kind of sick and stuff, and so he came there to live with me there in Louisiana. And I found him in the garage. He was just sitting there asleep. That's hard, That was a hard road to hoe. But
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, he probably knew he was gonna go. He was 70 years old. He was born in 1950. He was like 2 years old when we left Mississippi, and we came, and like I said, we got a house. We got a big house, and then we got the rest of them out, piece by piece. Not everybody came at the same time. My sister, Bunny, she was married to a guy, and George, I was next to George in birth, and George had gone into the service. Everybody that was left at the farm was Willie, Lester, Joseph, Vera, and Lucinda. It was 5 of them still with Mom and Daddy on the farm. They were kids, they were really young when I left. George wanted to get them away from Mississippi and the farm life. Because one of my brothers, Willie, was like my daddy, short-tempered, and so he got in trouble with the landowner. Mama realized that he was going to get hurt, probably killed if they didn't get him out of there. So she told Daddy, Mr. Chambers, we're going to have to get these children away from here before something terrible happens. And because the landowner, he did brute force to Willie. He threatened to hurt him, and Willie took the apart from the plow. In other words, I forget what it's called now. Can't think of it. But anyway, he was going to hit Willie, and Willie got this thing he took it from it's the thing that connects the mule to the plow. It goes between the plow and the horse, or the mule. We use mules. And that's what Willie got that and dared him to hit him. He dared, the landowner to hit him. And of course, that you don't do that. He was out of his place, So Mama told Daddy, we gonna have to get him out of here. And so we didn't have a telephone or anything. In fact, we didn't even have electricity when I left there. Single tree. That thing is called a single tree. I don't know why they call it a single tree, but because it's a thing about that long, and it has
a couple feet.
Yeah, and it has some rings that you hook the horse to there, and then you hook it to the plow also. Yeah.
You probably do some damage with that.
Oh yes, yes. But because it's part metal and part wood, but that's what Willie got to.
I mean, smart.
Oh yeah. So they made arrangements. My husband and Bunny's husband drove down there, to pick him up from Mississippi. The landowner's name was Douglas Collier, but we call him Mr. Doug. Where he lived, had to pass by his house, to get to our house, which was where Mama's, because I was already in California. It had to pass their house to, his house, to get to Mama's house. And, that in the South like that, everybody knows what's going on. Anybody suspicious come in, eyes are on them and stuff. When the car came in, and Mr. Doug saw a California tag on it, So he came down to the house to, and see what was going on. Anyway, he made the statement. He said, "You didn't come to get my N-word, you didn't come to, and they told him, no. Well, they had planned to stay a few days and rest up and go back. But after he came down and was inquiring, Mama, she always had a lot of wisdom. And she said, you know what? Y'all gonna have to get out of here as fast as you can. So she fried some chicken and made the food, and so that very same night that they came in that day, they packed up the car, and it took out the children. It was 5 of them. So the car was packed. She put quilts and stuff in the car and stuff. So they left out, and so what they did, Mr. Doug lived kind of like up on a hill, and so Mama's house was like down, and so what they did, they put the small kids in, which was Vera and Lucinda, those are my other 2 sisters, and they pushed that car without starting the motor, and they pushed that car up that hill past Mr. Doug's house, and they did it very quietly. I think it was around midnight. They knew he would be asleep, and then they started their car down the hill, and they jumped in, and they didn't start that motor until they got beyond, and they got on the road, and they were scared. They were so scared because they didn't know if they were going to be followed or what. But when he discovered that they were gone, it was nothing he could do, because Daddy was old. They were doing the farm work. It was just nothing that he could do. Later on, before they left out, he told Mama, he says, if you get them back, tell them I got a tractor, like a John Deere. They wouldn't have to do it, wouldn't have to farm by mule. Because see, this is how we were raised. One of Mama's saying was, an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. In other words, don't, work, work. Don't just get out there and they call it ratting on the job, pretending you're working and you're not. So we were raised to give a good day's work for our pay. And he knew they were good. They were really good at farming, and but Mama, this is what he said to Mama, tell him I could tell, if they'll come back, I got a tractor. So she just told him, Mr. Doug, she said, I'm sorry, but if you have to drive the tractor yourself because they're not coming back. That's how they got away.
Do you know anything about their journey across the country? Because I imagine that could have moments of being tenuous in that era.
They made it. They just stayed in their place. When they stopped for gas, they got their gas, and they, because I don't know what their trip was like, because I just hearing what they said that.
Yeah.
But they got away safe.
So now you're all in California for the most part, except for your parents. And is the music becoming more important? Are y'all performing out more, or how's that going?
When my brothers were in Mississippi, they had what they call a quartet. They used to sing at churches and stuff. So after they got out here, they really couldn't go to school because they were so far behind, not having gone to school enough in Mississippi. And and their knowledge and comprehension was so poor until at their age, they got teased, and so they all dropped out of school. And after they formed the group, what they call themselves, they were looking for a name after they got here, to call themselves, and they couldn't find a name, so they said, well, we're a Chambers, so we'll just be the Chambers Brothers. That's how it got started, with them being, the group as the Chambers Brothers. And then later on, because we all did sing and we were a large family, and I was impressed to start a family, Chambers family. We call ourselves the Chambers Family Singers. And so we got organized, and we sang a lot of different places, and because our group included the brothers, By this time, well, they were, already had made a good name for themselves, and so, I feel like we kind of ride on their coattails, would be great, and which it was. And I even wrote a play. It was called "And Then One Day We Stepped Out." It was the story of how they got out by pushing the car and stuff. I wrote it and produced it. We played it at Will She Bell Theater, which it turned out really nice, In fact, I brought a copy of it out. I said I was going to give it to you. I had it taped and everything.
Oh, look at that.
I want to read something to you. This is something I like to write, and I do poems. And so this came to me, and I, to write it, and I wrote it. I call it Reflection. I said, George and Victoria Chambers. When Daddy met Mama, he already had 3 children by 2 previous wives. 3 days after they met, they were married. Mama became wife number 3. They were married August 10th. Mama was born 1910. From 1927 to 1948, she gave birth to 10 children. The uniqueness of births: Major, Douglas, and George, 3 boys, 2 girls, Jewel and Bunny. 3 years between third boy, which was George, and first girl, which was me. 3 more boys and 2 girls, Vera and Lucinda, were born. 4 years between Willie, the last 2 girls born, the 24th and the 26th. Daddy passed February 26th. 1978. One day after Mama's birthday, Mama passed February 24th, one day before her birthday. 3 days. Daddy was buried March the 4th, Mama March the 1st, 3 days. Daddy was buried 6 days after his death. Mama was buried 6 days after her death. Daddy passed 1978. 30 years. Mama passed 2008. They both passed on a Sunday evening. Daddy was 30 years older than Mama. According to their death certificates, Daddy passed at 2:41 p.m., Mama at 5:35 p.m. If she had not passed and waited, if she lived or waited 6 minutes longer, it would have been exactly 3 hours between their deaths, 30 years later. The fee for Daddy's death certificate was $3. They both died at age 97. Had Mama lived to be 100, which is what she wanted to do, this uniqueness would have not occurred. I feel that Mama was so tuned into God and Daddy, it had to be this way. Only God could do this. And this gives me peace and closure.
So today is the day that she passed away.
Today is the 25th.
The 24th.
Sure is.
Yeah. That's interesting. Here we are talking about the history.
It sure is.
Well, what was it like raising your children here? You have just the one son who passed. Did you have other children?
Yes, I have. I had 3 sons and a daughter. I had 4 children.
Yeah.
So I lost my. Jerry was my youngest son, and he was interesting, to say the least. He got into everything that he could, but he. Well, the circumstances about his birth. I was telling you, about my husband coming and ahead of me and got a job as a dishwasher. At this job, it was at a restaurant in Leimert Park. There was a guy working there with him. He became a friend of the family. And me being so naive, and like I said, I was a virgin when I got married. After coming to our house and stuff. Well, I didn't know it then, but he was grooming me. I didn't know all of this until, I've gotten older and I'm familiar with terms and things. He had a niece named Virgin May, and he hooked Virgin May up with my husband, who was named Arthur Lee. And Arthur Lee was just about as naive as I, was. And he had, he established this relationship between my husband and his niece. But all the time, he had his eye on me. So he's grooming me. He became very, very, close to us in our family and everything. And my husband, Arthur Lee, he was almost like my dad, a very poor provider. And I hated that. And so as time went on, my dad got real sick one time and we all had to go home, because they thought he was going to die. And we all of us went back to Mississippi, hopefully he wouldn't die, which he didn't at that time. This guy was named Booker Langford. And he was really good to me. He said that, he gave me a big donation and he said they took it up on the job. I'm pretty sure they didn't. But he did so many good things. And by this time, and I became aware of the relationship between my husband and his niece. So when he made his move, he done groomed me, and that's how Jerry came about. My brothers, they knew about it and everything, and they loved my husband, and so they kind of took it out on Jerry, like Jerry, it was not Jerry's fault that,
Was it non-consensual sex?
It was consensual sex,
okay.
And I felt that I owed it to him because he had been, so good. Because there were times when, I didn't have food and he provided food. All of this, it took him years, but he was successful. He had his eye on the prize and he won. My brothers, they took it out on, they didn't like the guy. They didn't like Booker. So they took it out on Jerry. They used to thump his head and all that kind of stuff, and they mistreated him. And so it made him, in other words, I guess it just messed with his, he had an inferior complex. And so he used to just get into trouble. And he gave me a lot of trouble. And then he as he, grew up, and I explained to him what happened, because he was upset with his dad because he thought it was forced and everything. But I explained everything to him, and he, once he became aware of how the relationship went and everything. And then as he went to school and stuff, and he learned music. After he was able to get rid of the drug problem, he's a mama's boy. It's hard for him to forgive himself for what he put me through. And I tell him all the time, don't, but it's just hard for him, to forgive himself. So that's where he's at right now. He's a good singer. He plays a really good bass guitar.
Are all the descendants part of the choir or part of the singers, or is it just still the main part of the family that does it?
We sang for many years. Mama was with us. Daddy passed on. A couple of nieces, they kept it going. But then eventually, it just kind of folded up. And so the kids now, nobody's interested. When we first started out, it was like 40-something. We had 40-something people in the choir. The youngest was like 3, and my mom, she was in her 80s. We sang at the Hollywood Bowl it was called 5 Musical Families, and our family was chosen. So there was like a Chinese, a Russian, a black. It was 5 of us. I forgot, maybe Indian, but it was 5 musical families, and that's how we sang. Got an opportunity to perform there at the Hollywood Bowl. We made pictures and stuff. It's been really interesting, and I used to sew, and I made outfits for everybody. I made shirts for the men and dresses for the women. And our first appearance, we stepped out, and it looked so pretty because everybody had on the same identical thing. The men had on black suits with blue shirts, and we had on the blue dresses. We did a big event at Trade Tech. Are you familiar with Trade Tech? It's a college. Anyway, we did a big event there, and I made lavender dresses for everybody, and the men had on burgundy, not lavender, burgundy, and the men had on burgundy, black suits and burgundy shirts, and just, we went in style. I learned to sew when I was real little, also, because my mama sewed. She used to make quilts by hand, when we were kids and stuff coming up. And if somebody complained about being cold, sleeping cold, my mom would, she never threw away anything. She made our dresses from flour sacks. Mm-hmm. You used to be able to buy flour in a 25-pound bag. And so Daddy, when he would go shopping, and whatever pattern he, got, she would, next time it was time to buy flour, she would have him to pick up that same, another sack with that same, so she could make mine and Bunny's dresses. Mm-hmm. And we could describe to her how a dress that we wanted made, and she could make it. Mm. And so that passed on to me, but yeah. I couldn't. I sewed by pattern, but.
That's an interesting part of history, is that the flour companies made their sacks with designs and things because they knew that people were making clothing from them.
Yes, thank God, because they weren't able to buy yardage,
I've seen some of the clothing from that time on display. It's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, I lived through those times, yeah.
Looking back on your life, what do you think is one of the most profound moments for you?
Really, really, really profound is once my brothers became famous, and they would be on the road, and when they would come home, invite people and fix big meals and just feed people. Now that's something my grandmother did. As mean as she was, But once a year for her husband, for my grandfather, she would do this second Sunday in August thing where people would just come and bring food and just feed people. And that's, to me, that stands out. We still do it. Bob's been invited to one of our gatherings, you know. We just like to do that. It's a lasting impression in our lives where we just like to have people come together. No fighting, no cursing, no fussing, no violence. Just come together and just enjoy. It's no plan unless we plan to, you know, have some entertainment or whatever. But just come together, you know, and we would just pick anything to create that, to create that event.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we did, it was for my 90th birthday. We did a big thing in the backyard back there. And a lot of people came.
Yeah.
We sang, you know, just because always when we get together, we always sang. That's profound too. Anytime we would get together, we would always sing. It's really, really funny because my mom, you know, and we okay, this is how I would start. We start off singing gospel, and then the music, you know. Then we'd go into rock and roll or whatever and do that, and we'd dance. And my mom would even get up on the floor and, you know, in her little way of dancing, she would do her little step and stuff. But we would always end up just doing the gospel. Those are the two things that stands out in my life that we still do.
Some of your memories around the civil rights movement and Dr. King and Malcolm X.
I am not politically motivated. I've never gotten involved with politics.
How come?
I think it's perhaps because not being educated enough to realize, you know, what's going on. Mm. I never followed it, you know.
What about the wars, Vietnam and Korea?
I hate it.
Yeah.
I hate it, you know, because Jerry went into service. I think he served like 18 months.
In Korea?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't talk politics. I'm just not politically inclined. Never have been. And at my age, I never will be, you know.
Do you vote?
No.
Really?
I used to, because Mama... I mean, if Mama was still living, I would vote because she was, you know, my mom really, really, she loved voting.
Why do you think you don't do it anymore?
Because I think I don't know. The politicians I don't know. I just don't, I think it's rigged. That's how I feel about it. I haven't voted. In fact, here I'm not even registered now. I didn't vote in Louisiana. I lived there from 2009 to 2022. Mm. I mean 2022. I came back here. I'm not embarrassed to say it because I just, you know, I don't talk about it.
Yeah. What are your plans for the next 10 years? Just in life?
Well, I'll tell you like I told my cardiologist when I left Louisiana. And my health got, you know, bad. And I said, I'm going to California to live and not die. I'm gonna live until I die. So for the next 10 years, I'm just gonna try to, well, I want to be 105. My mom wanted to be 100, and I'm going for 105. So, that's a little bit more than 10 years. But, I'm 91 now, so I'm on my way to the 100. So, I'm just trying to make it day by day. I still drive. My hobby is word game. I play Words with Friends, and I win almost all of my games. I used to play Scrabble, and this is so close to Scrabble, so it keeps my mind, And when I'm driving, well, I know the points, like what each alphabet. I know the points. Like M is 4 points, and J is 10 points, and X is 8 points, and So when I drive, I play this game with license plates. I'm always trying to get 40 points. So what I do, I add up the points. I add the numbers, and I know what the alphabets. I know the points. So that's what I do. So it keeps me, it keeps my mind,
That seems like a good way to keep the mind active, for sure.
If I'm driving daily, that's what I do.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, I find cars that the alphabets and the numbers go past 40, sometimes 42, 43, But the most popular number is 39. For the next 10 years, I'm just going to take it day by day.
I think that's a good attitude. Thank you so much for your time and for your storytelling.
Yeah, thank you for listening.
Absolutely.
I could go on and on and on and on and on. Because when I came, when I left Louisiana, I left with the vision to take care of my brother Joe. He passed August the 15th, this past August. He had a problem with drugs and stuff. His health got really bad. I hung in there with him, was able to, for him to get a good burial. I got all that taken care of for him. With him gone, my sister, this Bunny, she's 2 years younger than I am, and her health is bad. So right now, I'm kind of, I always have a mission, and we're getting ready to move from here. So after we, get moved from here and I get settled in, I'll probably be spending a lot of nights with her. She's alone. Her husband had to be put into a facility because he has Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. So she's alone. She'll make 89 the 3rd of March. So I keep myself busy.
Yeah. Get busy living or get busy dying.
Yeah.
Right?
And I prefer living.
Yeah.
There's a scripture in the Bible, Proverbs, I think it's 18:21 says, death and life is in the power of the tongue. So I speak life to my life and not death. Mm-hmm. And so when there are times when I don't know if I'll wake up the next morning. So I said, well, I will live and not die to declare the works of the Lord. I wake up the next morning. So,
seems like a good partnership.
Yeah, it is. It is. So.
Thank you, Jewell. Thank you for listening, everybody. Bye. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.